Morning and welcome to Bible class, guys. Everybody wave at each other. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to my kitchen. You notice I have lots of things in front of me. We're going to talk about all of that today because we're talking about the Dead Sea. It sounds kind of creepy, doesn't it? Do you want to see a picture of it? Here we go. There is a picture of the Dead Sea. And so today, we're going to catch back up with Abraham and his family because some of his family got to go to a trip to the Dead Sea. And so we'll talk about that. We'll check out what the Dead Sea is and what it looks like today. And then there's a bonus place that we're going to visit. Are you ready? Nod your heads if you're ready. You ready? Oh, good. Nod your heads. Okay, very good. Before we go to the Dead Sea, we have to remember where we are in the earth because this is geography class, right? Okay, are you ready to sing the continent song? Here we go. Tell me the continent, tell me the continent, tell me if you can. North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa. Don't forget Australia, don't forget Antarctica. Tell me the continent, tell me the continent, tell me if you can. Well, very good singing. So we are starting on the continent of North America today, and we are going to fly to the Dead Sea. So here's what that looks like on Google Earth. We're going to fly across the Atlantic Ocean, across the continent of Africa, and to the modern day country of Israel. And then it's going to zoom in to the Dead Sea. And we're going to pan out a little bit so that way you can see that it's actually today, it's in two pieces. There's kind of like a land bridge in between. So when you look at a map of the Bible lands, like when we get back to Bible class and you look at a map, or even if you go on Google Earth, if you zoom in, now you can recognize this body of water. Something that makes it really unique is the southern part, the bottom part. It has kind of all those lines on it. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay, so to get to where we're going in our Bible lesson today, we always start with the Bible because the Bible is the best guidebook. And so we're going to start in Genesis 13. And so read this to the people around you at home. Are you ready? Abram left the Negev desert. He went from place to place until he came to Bethel. Then he came to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier. So remember that Abraham would have been like what today we call a Bedouin. He would have wandered from place to place with all of his herds. And so if we look at the picture of a Bedouin, this is what we think of when we talk about Abraham. And so Abraham and his family would have lived in tents. In fact, the Bible tells us they lived in tents because tents are really great portable houses. How many of you guys have been camping? Raise your hand. Yeah, you know tents are pretty helpful, and they're easy to move. Now, if you notice, Abraham's tent door always stayed open, right? It was always open to welcome guests because the Bedouin, especially Abraham, were very hospitable. Remember, we learned that word a couple weeks ago, hospitality, right? That's taking care of guests and travelers and anybody who needs food and taking care of their needs. In the desert, the Bedouin have to do that because the desert can be very deadly. And so if someone is traveling, they need to make sure they can get food and water and shelter and safety. And Abraham was hospitable. He provided that hospitality to people around him. And the story we learned a couple weeks ago, there were 3 special visitors to Abraham. Remember, we were in my kitchen talking about it when Sarah made all that bread. Do you remember that? Well, those same 3 visitors went to go visit another member of Abraham's family named Lot. Lot was Abraham's nephew, and that's who we'll talk about mostly today is Mr. Lot. Okay, so let's go to our next screen. Our next scripture will tell us what's happening in the story. Remember, Abraham and Lot, both shepherds with lots of animals. But the Bible tells us, let's read this together to people around us, but the land didn't have enough food for both Abraham and Lot. Right? They had herds and many servants, so they weren't able to stay together. They had so many animals and people to feed. The land could not support both of their families. So Abraham had an idea. Abraham said, you know what, we're family. We shouldn't argue. So maybe we should split up. Maybe you should pick a way to go and I'll go the other way. And that's what they did. And Abraham let Lot have the first choice. And Lot looked around the land. They probably stood on a hill and they looked around. And Lot found a piece of ground that he really liked. And that's our next scripture. I think actually here's a picture of what the herds might have looked like. And you can see there's a Bedouin man. This is from today. But imagine Abraham and his herds and Lot and his herds. They would have had sheep and goats and camels. The cows probably wouldn't have gone on this trip. They would have stayed north where it was green a lot more of the year. But definitely sheep and goats and camels. And they had a lot. And so let's go to our verse. Okay, read this with the people around you. Lot looked around. He saw that the whole Jordan River Valley toward the town of Zoar had plenty of water. It was like what? The garden of the Lord. Wow. Remember all the way back to our Garden of Eden lesson. Remember, we were in the Mesopotamian marshes in southern Iraq. And what was the color that you remember most from seeing that? What color do you think the Garden of Eden had? What colors do you picture? Green, right? All the trees and the grass. And how about water? Yeah, lots of blue water. Think about all of the animals. Remember all the birds we saw in my class? Yeah, so the Garden of Eden was lush and green and beautiful and had plenty of food. And that's what Lot chose. Lot chose the best. Have you ever done that with a sibling? And maybe you wanted to choose, but you let them choose first. Or maybe a friend you were playing with and you let them choose first. That was really nice of Abraham. Okay, so the next place, I actually have the map. So if Lot had Google Maps, if Lot had Google Maps, this might have been a possible route he took. We don't really know. We just know that he went east from spot number 1 on your map is that area between Bethel and Ai. Today it's a modern town called Beitin in Ramallah in the West Bank. And so he would have gone from there in the hills down into the Jordan River Valley into the Dead Sea area. And Lot would have ended up down at number 2. Now, he might have gone on either side, but what matters is that he went from north to southeast. I have to think about that in my head. You have to think about directions. Okay. All right. So that's where he went. And do you want to see what it looks like today on the satellite view? Check this out. You can see the hills coming up on either side. So on the west side, you have Israel. On the east side, on the right, you have the country, modern country of Jordan. And then in the middle is this Dead Sea. Okay, I want you to take your fingers. Don't touch your screen, but point. Can you find the mountains? You find the mountains? Okay, now trace your finger without touching your screen down to the Sea of Galilee, right? It looks kind of tiny, but it's a body of water in the north, okay? Use your finger and trace down the little green pathway. That's the Jordan River. And if you keep going down south, then you come to the Dead Sea. Oh, but wait a minute. There's no outlet. It doesn't go anywhere. When the water comes from the Sea of Galilee to the Jordan River to the Dead Sea, it stops. It doesn't go out to the ocean. And that's part of what makes the Dead Sea so unique that we'll talk about in a minute. So keep that in your mind and we'll come back to that. Okay, let's see here. So in Lot's, well, actually Lot used to get in a lot of trouble. So Lot one time got captured by bad guys. Yikes. That was crazy. Lot gets himself in trouble a lot. But what we're going to talk about today is the time when Lot moved to the town of Sodom. And there were two towns that you just saw on the satellite view, Sodom and Gomorrah. Actually, I'm going to go back really fast because I forgot to show you where Abraham went. Oops, sorry. If you look at this, Abraham didn't go southeast to the Dead Sea. He went southwest to a city called Hebron. And we talked about that in the Abraham Journey video, our very first one that we did on Zoom. So if you can't remember that, you can go back and watch. Okay, so, oops, I went too fast. I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm so excited to tell you about this time Lot got in trouble. He moved to this city called Sodom. And Sodom and Gomorrah were towns kind of close by. And the problem was that the people who lived there did not show hospitality. They did not like visitors. They did not like guests. They did not share their food, probably. And they were just generally mean. And in fact, the Bible tells us they were evil. They were not hospitable like Abraham was. Remember, Abraham and Sarah were so nice to visitors, and Lot was too. But the towns weren't. And so God decided that he was going to destroy the towns. But he did save Lot and his family. And Lot and his family had to escape really fast. They had to run away from the town before God destroyed it. But there's a problem. God, the angels told them one very important rule. Don't look back, right? Don't turn around. Don't turn around and look back. So Lot and his two daughters and his wife ran out of the city. But the problem was his wife stopped and turned around and looked back. Ooh. So you know what happened? She turned into a pillar of salt. That's Lot's wife on the screen. Does it look like a lady standing there? It's actually a rock. It's not really Lot's wife, but all the school children there all kind of call that Lot's wife. Isn't that interesting? So this is a pillar of salt that looks like a rock. So yeah, Lot got into trouble. Now, remember, use your imagination. When Lot moved to the city of Sodom, do you remember why he moved there? Because it looked like the Garden of Eden, right? It looked like the garden. And it was so green and beautiful. And so you have to remember, when Lot originally moved there, it was green and beautiful. But today, it does not look like that, right? Because God destroyed it. So let's see what it looks like today. So that's the picture that I showed you at the beginning. And I have a poll because I'm curious what you think. Look at this picture. Now look at the white stuff in the picture. Don't give it away, Finn. Finn gave a guess yesterday. But I have a poll for you. And Mr. Ryan is going to push that to your computers. So get your fingers ready to make a selection on this poll. What is that white stuff on the picture of the Dead Sea? Is it foam? Is it ice? Is it salt? Or is it sand? Okay, we've had a couple people vote. Let's capture your votes. Tell me what you think that white stuff is. Hey, are there parents helping on this one? So far, everybody has a pretty similar answer. Okay, we'll give you another couple seconds. Get your votes in. Here we go. Almost everybody's done. Okay, shall we end it? You want to see the results? Ooh, 87% think it is salt. You are correct. It is salt. And that's also why I have all of this salt in front of me. So I gave you sort of a clue. So what does it mean that the Dead Sea is so filled with salt? I have a video that's going to show you what that looks like today. So I know some people who went there, and this is their video. Are you ready? Okay, so let's play our video. Here we go.
I am walking walking on salt, literally. We are at the Dead Sea, and underneath me, a lot of salt accumulated and became like part of the beach. It is so hard. It's like walking on hard ice. But look how beautiful the water is and the color. And if you touch it, it's like touching oil from all the minerals that it has. Wonderful place.
The Dead Sea is the saltiest body of water on Earth. In fact, it is 9.6 times saltier than the ocean. It is so salty that nothing lives in it, not a single fish or a living organism. But on the bright side, because of the salt level, even if you try, you kind of can't really sink. You'll simply float on top of it.
Wasn't that amazing? And how they floated on the water. So it turns out there are two people from our church that I think all of you know who got to go to the Dead Sea a couple of years ago. You want to see their picture? Do you guys recognize those men? Anybody? Oh, I see a couple heads nodding. That's Mr. Brian and Mr. Brent. They're two of our elders at Northside. And they and their wives and a small group from our church all got to go to Israel with Missy Lane Denman. Because remember, Missy Lane grew up there. So she got to help take them around and show them all the spots. Look, they're floating. It's impossible to drown because the salt makes the water buoyant. Have you heard that word before? Oh, yes, buoyant. Buoyancy is what makes something float. It's pretty cool. Okay, so the problem, though, with having all that salt in the water is that it makes the water evaporate and disappear. And what happens when the water disappears is that we get sinkholes. And also, the Dead Sea is evaporating so quickly, it might just completely evaporate and be gone. But luckily, there are people in Israel and in Jordan and the West Bank who are all working together to save the Dead Sea. And I'll post a link to a really great PBS Nova special called Saving the Dead Sea. And they talk about what they're doing to save it because it really is quite a treasure. Okay, so I have a bonus for you. Remember I said there's a bonus location? Let's go back to our map. The bonus location is number 3. And it is on the northwest side of the Dead Sea. It's a place called Qumran. Can you say that? Qumran. Qumran is an area where actually people used to live. And interestingly, a shepherd throwing a rock made an incredible discovery. Back in 1947, a Bedouin shepherd, think like Abraham and Lot with their sheep, came here and they were trying to find a lost sheep, and they threw a rock and it went in one of the caves and they heard a crash. It turns out the rock broke a jar, a clay jar that was holding something very special. It was holding a scroll. Do you remember what a scroll is? It's like a book, but it's rolled up. Yeah, some of you have made those in Bible class. And the scrolls turned out to be the oldest copies of the Old Testament that anyone has ever found. Amazing discovery. And so what it showed us is once scholars started reading, they found every book of the Old Testament except for Esther. And they were able to read them and see that the Bible we have today is the same as what's on those scrolls from 2,000 years ago, from the time of Jesus. And so it shows us that God has kept our Bible the same since the beginning. And how amazing is that? And all those were found in the Qumran caves. They ended up finding 11 caves and like over 200 scrolls. Some of the scrolls actually were pretty readable and you could open them up, but many of them had fallen apart into little pieces like a puzzle, like a jigsaw puzzle. And so scientists had to figure out how to put them all back together. And then some of them have faded so badly that scientists now are using technology from NASA to read them. It's amazing. So I'll have links for you in the description of the video that I post where you can go learn more about that if you'd like. The Dead Sea has been host to so many Bible stories and amazing archaeology finds. And so I'm glad that you came with me today to take a look at it. And one more thing is that in the book of Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews reminds us about Abraham. And because of Abraham's faith, he made his home in the land that God had promised. And Abraham was in a strange country. He lived there in tents. This is in the big Hebrews faith chapter, talking about all the faith that Abraham had to leave his home and go to a new country. And now, when you read about that, you can now picture the tent that Abraham and Lot lived in. You can picture their herd. And now you can picture the place where Lot went to around the Dead Sea. Hopefully someday we'll all get to visit there, right? I want to go float. So I have some of the salt here that the Dead Sea is really famous for. I actually have this little vial right here. This is actual water and sand from the Dead Sea. A very special person gave this to me. And it is so cool because when you touch the water, it really is like mineral oil. It's very soft, silky. So hopefully someday we'll all get to go travel there and check it out. I'm so glad that you joined me today. So next week, we have another Bible lesson from home, and we're going to talk about some very big promises that God made to Abraham. And it involves stars and sand. So next week, you get to be an astronomer to help count the stars. And we'll use Google Sky and go look at all the stars. And then you'll get to be a geologist and help count the grains of sand. I'm so excited. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Dead Sea today, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for being here today, guys. Bye. Ben, wave and say bye.
Bye.
No, the camera's wave to the camera.
Bye.
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 It went so fast. We're all done.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
You're welcome.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye, Isla.